Before you begin part 3 of week 4's lecture, you need to stop and read Pat Hoy and Robert Deaney, one of the readings for this week. Patsy Hoy, second, was my mentor for 10 years at New York University, and he, along with his 4 directors, including me, worked on theories of writing and essay writing. To begin, any essay, and in fact, almost any piece of writing, has 3 parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning of a LifeWriting essay, the kind that you're writing, usually sets up an implicit or explicit question. The middle explores the concepts you're working with. The ending answers the question that's asked in the beginning. Let's look at an example from Amy Tan's essay, Mother Tongue. Let's read the beginning and then right after, the ending. Tan's beginning reads, "I am not a scholar of English or literature. I cannot give you much more than personal opinions on the English language and its variations in this country or others. I am a writer, and by that definition, I am someone who has always loved language. I am fascinated by language in daily life. I spend a great deal of my time thinking about the power of language, the way it can evoke an emotion, a visual image, a complex idea, or a simple truth. Language is the tool of my trade, and I use them all the Englishes I grew up with." Tan introduces us to the power of language and her love for language because she is a writer. But she does more than that. She surprises us with that sentence, "and I use them all the Englishes I grew up with." Tan's beginning sets up the theme of her essay. She's going to be exploring language and its power. Her implicit question, though, which sets up our expectations for what she'll discuss, though, lies in that phrase, "all the Englishes I grew up with." What are those Englishes? What roles do they play in her writerly life? We can expect, then, to read about language, power, and multiple Englishes in this essay. In the beginning of an essay, you have to sow the seeds that will grow into discussions in the middle of the essay. But let's move to Tan's ending. Fortunately, for reasons I won't get into today, I later decided I should envision a reader for the stories I would write. And the reader I decided upon was my mother, because these were stories about mothers. So with this reader in mind, and in fact she did read my early drafts, I began to write stories using all the Englishes I grew up with. The English I spoke to my mother, which for lack of a better term might be described as simple. The English she used with me, which for lack of a better term might be described as broken. My translation of her Chinese, which could certainly be described as watered down, and what I imagined to be her translation of her Chinese if she could speak in perfect English, her internal language, and for that I sought to preserve the essence, but not an English or a Chinese structure. I wanted to capture what language ability tests can never reveal: her intent, her passion, her imagery, the rhythms of her speech, and the nature of her thoughts. Apart from what any critic had to say about my writing, I knew I had succeeded where it counted when my mother finished reading my book and gave me her verdict. So easy to read. We can see the relationship between Tan's beginning and ending. Her ending answers those implicit questions from the beginning. We know what those multiple Englishes are. We know how Tan uses them in her own writing, and we know about the power of her mother's English and all the Englishes Tan grew up with. If you now go back and read the middle of Tan's essay, you'll also find that the ending captures her main discussion points from the middle, not a mere repetition, but going beyond the middle to the full complexity of her idea. Why those Englishes, her mother's Englishes, were necessary and became so powerful and evocative in her own book. Along the way, she mentions the limitations of English tests, and she ends by validating her mother's Englishes and her reading. Having shown you an example of a beginning and ending, I want to talk about the writing process and the middle. Never start writing an essay with the beginning. Think about what Pat Hoy says about the middle of essays. Any kind of essay, not just the LifeWriting one you're doing for this class. He speaks of the middle of an essay as an exploration, where you show us pieces of evidence and how you think about them, sometimes in surprising ways. To essay or SAA means to try. And in fact, in the middle of an essay, you're trying to think, to delve, to explore, to dig. You may be analyzing a text, as Michelle Tsui does in Test Flight, or concepts of language identity and slippage, as Samara Hennett does, or the power inherent to multiple Englishes, as Amy Tan does. The important thing is that you do not limit yourself by deciding on an answer to your question and trying to prove it. If you do, you limit yourself. So you should always begin with the middle of your essay, with analysis and with thought reflection. For your LifeWriting essay, you'll have to figure out what question you're asking as you explore your scene and its concepts and other writers' ideas about those concepts. When you reach the ending, you'll probably know the question and the answer you want to give us. You can then go back and write your beginning, carefully seeding that beginning with keywords related to the concepts you want to explore. And you should, either directly or indirectly, ensure that your beginning contains a question that your middle will explore. Make sure that your ending not only refers back to the movements you've included in the middle. Your ending should go beyond them to speak of the significance of your answer. Why does that matter? Answer to the rest of us. Why does that answer matter to the rest of us? What are you trying to tell us, and why should we care? Notice that I switched from you to we in those last couple of sentences. That's because your LifeWriting essay must, in the end, move beyond the vertical pronoun I. In the end, whatever you discover from your own experiences and your own thinking, it's got to matter to more than just you. It's got to matter to the rest of us, your audience. So in that very last part, in the end, your I has to shift to we. One final note about beginnings and endings. Your beginning can be more than one paragraph long, and your ending can also be more than one paragraph long. When you write a really short essay, you can get away with one paragraph for a beginning and one for an ending. But when you're writing longer essays, one paragraph usually isn't enough. In this class, once again, you're writing a different type of essay than a standard academic one for reasons I'll tell you about when you've finished it. In the meantime, if you have a traditional academic essay to write and you need to know how to do that, I highly recommend the Writing Center as a resource that can help you through the process. If you need to know how to write a thesis, how to construct an argument, and so on, please check out the Writing Center series of workshops. I also highly recommend Dr. Stephanie Bell's series of short videos about writing, which will help you through. In tutorial this week, you'll be working on beginnings and endings because your LifeWriting essay draft is due in week 5. In the meantime, let's return to the LifeWriting essay that you're building and review what you're supposed to be doing. As you create your essay, keep in mind Newman's quotes and the ways he suggests we explore to attain knowledge. We know not by a direct and simple vision, not at a glance, but, as it were, by piecemeal and accumulation, by a mental process, by going round an object, by the comparison, the combination, the mutual correction, the continual adaptation of many partial notions, by the employment, concentration, and joint action of many faculties and exercises of mind. Thought reflection, as I emphasized in part 2 of this lecture, is essential to your essay. There are 2 kinds. Today, I emphasize the second because it's harder to do. The first is analyzing a scene, text, or object. The second, and the harder kind, is telling us what you think about what the scene, text, or object says, and telling us why that matters to us. That's what TAN does, and that's what every other writer on the reading list for this module does. How do you build an essay through discovery? First and foremost, thought reflection, thought reflection, thought reflection. You first closely read a scene or a text or an art object, as we've done with multiple texts. Girl with a Pearl Earring, John Henry Newman, and others. Tell us what the scene or object shows or what the writer says. Try to name at least 2 concepts to be worked with. Next, tell us what you make of this, what the scene says or what the writer says. What do you think about that concept or those concepts? This is thought reflection. Next, connect another writer's idea, a text, to your thought reflection. We did this last week. Tell us what the author says, connect that to your own thought reflection, then tell us what you make of that writer's idea in relation to your previous thinking. More thought reflection, in fact, to create movement. If you get stuck, you can't think of anything new, then return to that text or add a new one. Keep building, keep thinking and reflecting, keep exploring. Let's also review the parts of an essay. The beginning introduces your topic, plants the seeds of what is to come, asks an implicit or explicit question that will be explored in the middle. The middle explores, in a thoughtful way, potential aspects of the question you asked or implied in the beginning. It uses evidence, scenes, texts, other sources, and thought reflection to create movement of thought. It never repeats itself. The ending draws together the threads of the middle and answers the question that was explored. It also moves to a larger context and significance. Why, in essence, does the answer to this question matter? And one note, in a life-writing essay, at some point, the beginning and ending usually transcend the I, becoming we or us, to create that larger significance. Let's also review how to build a thoughtful essay. Your purpose is to explore and develop a thoughtful idea. You don't usually begin with the beginning. You usually begin with that exploration. For your life-writing essay, you usually start to begin to explore your scene first, because that should contain what you're interested in exploring. You build movement by including a source, a text, when you get stuck. You create a connection by looking for a similarity, and you create movement by looking for a difference in that author's idea. You bridge elements, your scene, your texts, with thought reflection, TR. Thought reflection is where you develop your idea. And so, use writing to discover new thinking and tell us something we haven't already heard. Do not leap to the obvious. You will have problems with this essay if you create a rigid outline, you use a thesis statement. Life-writing essays usually don't, though other types of essays may. You will also have difficulty if you decide what you're going to say at the end before you write the middle. You will run into problems if you try to write your essay the night before it's due. And finally, you will definitely have problems if you just cut and paste together your exercises with no changes and no thought reflection. What will you gain from this type of writing and thinking? First, the joys of conception and discovery as you craft your own thinking. Secondly, sound strategies for reading humanities texts. And thirdly, strategies for using sources to create thought, reflection, and movement, the heart of academic work. Your essay must explore and develop an interesting idea, have a thoughtful middle, beginning, and ending, be grammatically appropriate for the occasion, and have a tone appropriate for the audience. These standards are written in the course outline. The hard requirements, that is, the absolute minimum you must include in your essay. You will find the complete write-up of expectations for your draft essay on eClass under week 4. They'll show up as of 10 o'clock this coming Tuesday morning. Make sure you read the instructions. Your essay must include 1 scene, references to 2 written texts, a reference to 1 art object or objects, a works cited list that includes all written texts and art objects or objects, and the length 5 to 7 double-spaced pages, not including a works cited list. I hope you enjoy moving towards a draft of your essay. This ends the pre-recorded lecture for week 4. Thanks for listening and see you soon. This is Andrea signing off.